Seo-Yoon Park walked through the doors of Lincoln High School on a Tuesday morning. Her backpack was heavy with books. Her uniform was old but clean. Her mother had washed and ironed it the night before. Seo-Yoon always tried to look her best even though they did not have much money. She was 16 years old and in 11th grade. She loved school. She studied hard every night after her mother came home from work. Seo-Yoon wanted to go to college. She wanted to make her parents proud. They had worked so hard to give her a better life. The hallways were crowded with students. Some talked and laughed with friends. Others rushed to their lockers. Seo-Yoon walked quietly. She did not have many friends. She spent most of her time studying, but she did not mind. Education was important to her. Her first class was history with Mrs. Patricia Coldwell. Mrs. Coldwell had been teaching at Lincoln High for 20 years. She was 52 years old. Many people said she was a good teacher, but Seo-Yoon did not think so. Mrs. Coldwell treated her differently than the other students. Seo-Yoon entered the classroom and sat in the front row. She liked sitting close to the teacher. It helped her focus and learn better. She took out her notebook and pen. She was ready to learn. Mrs. Coldwell walked into the room. She was a tall woman with gray hair. She wore glasses and carried a large bag filled with papers. She did not smile much. She put her bag on the desk and looked at the class. "Good morning, class," Mrs. Coldwell said. Her voice was flat and cold. "Good morning, Mrs. Coldwell," the students replied. The teacher began the lesson. She talked about American history and immigration. She wrote important dates on the board. Seo-Yoon copied everything into her notebook. She wanted to remember it all. Mrs. Coldwell asked a question. "Who can tell me about the immigration laws in the early 1900s? Seo-Yoon raised her hand quickly. She had read about this topic the night before. She knew the answer, but Mrs. Coldwell did not look at her. She looked at other students instead. "Michael?" Mrs. Coldwell called on a boy in the back row. Michael looked confused. I'm not sure," he said. "Anyone else?" Mrs. Coldwell asked. Seo-Yoon kept her hand up. She waved it a little, hoping the teacher would see, but Mrs. Coldwell looked past her again. "Jennifer?" The teacher called on a girl near the window. Jennifer shook her head. "I don't know," she said quietly. Seo-Yoon's hand was still raised. Other students began to notice. A boy named David Chen, who sat 2 seats away, looked at Seo-Yoon. He looked at Mrs. Coldwell. He frowned. Mrs. Coldwell finally looked at Seo-Yoon. "Put your hand down, Seo-Yoon," she said. "Let others participate." Seo-Yoon slowly lowered her hand. Her face felt hot. She had only wanted to answer the question. She did not understand why the teacher was upset with her. Mrs. Coldwell gave the answer herself and continued the lesson. Seo-Yoon tried to focus, but her heart felt heavy. Later in the class, Mrs. Coldwell assigned group work. The students would work in teams of 3 to discuss a historical event. Mrs. Coldwell walked around the room putting students into groups. "Michael, Jennifer, and Tom, you 3 work together," she said. "Sarah, Jake, and Lisa, you're a group." She continued until almost everyone had a group. Seo-Yoon waited to hear her name. But Mrs. Coldwell did not put her with anyone. "Seo-Yoon, you can work alone," Mrs. Coldwell said without looking at her. "But Mrs. Coldwell," Seo-Yoon said softly, "it's a group project." The teacher stopped and turned to face her. "You might communicate better on your own," she said. Her voice was cold. "Sometimes it's easier that way." The other students became very quiet. They looked at Seo-Yoon. Then they looked away. No one said anything. Seo-Yoon felt her eyes start to burn with tears, but she blinked them back. She would not cry in front of everyone. David Chen looked angry. His hands were tight fists on his desk. But he did not say anything either. Seo-Yoon moved her desk to the side and began working alone. She could hear the other groups talking and laughing. She felt very lonely. She did not understand what she had done wrong. She spoke English well. She was born in America. Why did the teacher say she might communicate better alone? The class continued. Time moved slowly. Seo-Yoon worked on her assignment, but her mind kept thinking about what Mrs. Coldwell had said. When the group work ended, Mrs. Coldwell collected the assignments. Then she pulled out a stack of papers from her bag. These were the essays the students had written last week. Mrs. Coldwell had graded them. "I want to discuss your essays," Mrs. Coldwell said. She began handing back the papers. Some students smiled when they saw their grades. Others looked disappointed. Mrs. Coldwell held up one paper. She did not hand it back. "I want to talk about this essay," she said to the class. "This one concerns me." Seo Yun's stomach dropped. It was her essay. She could see her name on the top of the paper. "This essay is very well written," Mrs. Coldwell said, but she did not sound happy. She sounded suspicious. "The vocabulary is advanced. The arguments are complex. It's very sophisticated." Some students looked confused. If the essay was good, why did Mrs. Coldwell sound upset? "Seo Yun," Mrs. Coldwell said, looking directly at her, "did you write this yourself?" The classroom became completely silent. Everyone stared at Seo Yun. Her heart began to beat very fast. "Yes, Mrs. Coldwell," Seo Yun said quietly. "I wrote it myself." "Did anyone help you?" the teacher asked. "Your parents, perhaps? An older brother or sister?" Seo Yun felt embarrassed and confused. "No," she said. "I wrote it alone. I always do my own work." Mrs. Coldwell looked at her for a long moment. "It just seems very sophisticated for someone from your background," she said.
"Are you sure no one helped you?"
Seo Yun did not know what to say. What did the teacher mean by your background? She was a good student. She always studied hard. She read books from the library. She worked on her writing. Why was this surprising? "I worked very hard on it," Seo Yun said. Her voice was shaking now. "I spent 3 nights writing and editing it. I did it myself." Mrs. Coldwell made a sound that seemed like she did not believe her. "I see," she said. She put the paper down on Seo Yun's desk. There was a B- written in red at the top. Seo Yun looked at the grade. She had worked so hard on that essay. She thought it was her best work. She expected an A, but the grade was much lower. There were red marks all over the paper, but no real comments explaining what was wrong. Mrs. Coldwell walked back to the front of the class. "Let me remind everyone," she said, "that all work must be your own. Academic dishonesty is a serious matter." She was looking at Seo Yun when she said it. The message was clear. She was accusing Seo Yun of cheating, even without saying it directly. Seo Yun felt like she could not breathe. Her hands started to shake. She put them in her lap so no one would see. This was not fair. She had done nothing wrong. "Now let me talk about another issue," Mrs. Coldwell continued. She stood in front of the class with her arms crossed. "This school has a scholarship program for students. It's meant to help those who need financial support." She paused. Several students shifted in their seats. They sensed something uncomfortable was coming. "Some students receive these scholarships," Mrs. Coldwell said, "but I wonder sometimes if the right students are getting them. There are many deserving local families whose children need help, students whose parents have been part of this community for generations, but the scholarships go to certain students instead." She did not look at Seo Yun directly. She did not say her name. But everyone knew who she was talking about. Seo Yun was one of the scholarship students. Everyone knew this. David Chen could not stay quiet anymore. "That's not fair," he said loudly. His face was red with anger. "Excuse me?" Mrs. Coldwell said, turning to face him. "Scholarships are based on grades and need," David said. "It doesn't matter where someone's family is from." "That's not right." Mrs. Coldwell's face became hard. "Mr. Chen, I did not ask for your opinion," she said coldly. "If you interrupt again, you will receive a detention." David looked like he wanted to say more. His jaw was tight, but he stayed quiet. He looked at Seo Yun with kind eyes, trying to tell her he was sorry he could not do more. The bell rang. The class was finally over. Students quickly gathered their things and rushed toward the door. Seo Yun stayed in her seat. She felt frozen. She could not move. Mrs. Coldwell began erasing the board. She did not look at Seo Yun. She did not apologize or explain. She just continued with her work as if nothing had happened. Finally, Seo Yun stood up. She grabbed her backpack and walked out of the room. Her legs felt weak. Her eyes were full of tears that she could no longer hold back. She rushed down the hallway. She did not want anyone to see her cry. She found the girls' bathroom and went inside. It was empty. As soon as she was alone, the tears came. Seo Yun leaned against the sink and cried. She felt so hurt and so angry. She had done nothing wrong. She worked harder than most students. She was respectful and kind. But her teacher treated her like she did not belong, like she was less than the other students. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She typed a message to her mother. "Mom, I want to change schools. Please, I can't stay here anymore." She pressed send and put the phone in her pocket. She knew her mother was at work and could not answer right away. Her mother worked at the hospital as a janitor. She could not check her phone during work hours. "We did," Seo-yun agreed. "Thank you for being brave enough to record what happened. Thank you for being my friend when it was not easy. That is what friends do," David said simply. That evening, the Park family went to visit Ji-hoon's mother's grave. It was a tradition before major life changes. They brought flowers and incense. Min-ji and Ji-hoon told Seo-yun's grandmother about everything that had happened. "Your granddaughter graduated at the top of her class," Min-ji said in Korean, speaking to the gravestone. "She is going to a top university. She spoke up against injustice. She made us proud. She made you proud." Seo-yun placed flowers on the grave and bowed deeply. She wished she could have met her grandmother, but she felt her grandmother's strength flowing through her. The courage to survive, the determination to create better lives, the refusal to accept injustice. "Thank you, grandmother," Seo-yun said quietly, "for being brave enough to come to a new country, for giving our family this chance. I will honor your sacrifice by living fully and speaking truthfully." They drove home as the sun set. The city lights began to glow. Seo-yun looked out the window at the diverse neighborhoods, the schools, the communities where change was happening slowly but surely. She thought about the students who would enter Lincoln High School in the fall. Students like Jordan who would not know how different things used to be. Students who would benefit from the changes that had been made. Students who would have better experiences because Seo-yun had spoken up. That night, Seo-yun sat at her desk and opened her journal. She had been writing in it throughout this entire experience. Now on this important day, she wrote one final entry for this chapter of her life. "Today I graduated," she wrote. "A year ago I wanted to disappear. I felt invisible and powerless. I thought my voice did not matter. But I was wrong." She paused, thinking about what to say. "Speaking up was the hardest thing I have ever done. It was scary and painful. People attacked me. I had nightmares. I cried many times. But I also learned something important." She continued writing, her pen moving steadily across the page. "I learned that my voice matters. Not because I am special, but because every voice matters. Every person who experiences injustice has a right to speak up. Every person who sees wrong has a responsibility to say something." She wrote about the community that formed around her, about David and Marcus and Sophia, about Sarah and Grace and Mrs. Foster, about how change requires many people working together. "Justice is not one big moment," she wrote. "It is many small moments of courage. It is choosing to speak instead of staying silent. It is choosing to act instead of looking away. It is choosing to hope instead of accepting defeat." She ended the entry with words that captured everything she had learned. "This is not the end. This is the beginning. The fight for justice continues, and I am ready." Seo-yun closed her journal and looked at the college acceptance letter on her desk. Next to it was the award from the Korean American Association. Next to that was a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Students' Courage Sparks School Reform." The work was ongoing. It would continue in college. It would continue throughout her life. But Seo-yun was not discouraged by this. She was energized. She picked up her phone and called Grace Kim. "Grace, I've been thinking," Seo-yun said. "I want to volunteer with the Immigrant Rights Organization this summer. I want to help other families who are going through what my family went through. Can you help me get started?" Grace's voice was warm and proud. "Of course," she said. "I think that is a wonderful idea. You have learned so much. Now you can help others." After the call, Seo-yun felt a sense of purpose. Her experience had been painful, but it had also given her direction. She knew what she wanted to do with her life. She wanted to fight for justice. She wanted to help people who did not have power. She wanted to change systems that hurt people. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was alive with lights and movement. Somewhere out there, other students were experiencing discrimination. Other families were struggling to be heard. Other people were deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. Seo-yun thought about them. She thought about sending them a message across the distance. A message that said, "You are not alone. Your voice matters. Speaking up is hard, but silence is harder. Change is possible." She turned away from the window and looked at the family photo on her desk. 3 generations looked back at her. Her grandmother in Korea, who she never met. Her parents who sacrificed everything. herself the beneficiary of all their courage. She picked up the photo and smiled. "We did it," she said softly. "We survived. We spoke up. We changed things. And we are just beginning." The next morning, Seo-Yun woke up early. She had a busy day ahead. She was meeting with other students from the equity team to plan training for incoming freshmen. She was preparing materials for her volunteer work. She was getting ready for college. As she got dressed, she thought about Jordan Smith and all the other new students who would enter Lincoln High School in the fall. They would walk into a different school than the one Seo-Yun had entered 3 years ago. Not perfect, but better. They would have a principal who cared about equity. They would have teachers who were trained to recognize bias. They would have systems that took complaints seriously. They would have examples of students who spoke up and created change. And if they faced discrimination, they would know they could speak up. They would know their voices mattered. They would know that change was possible. That was Seo-Yun's legacy. Not just the reforms at one school, but the message that student voices have power. The message that speaking up is worth it. The message that one person's courage can inspire others and create real change. As Seo-Yun left her apartment that morning, she felt different than she had a year ago. She stood taller. She spoke more confidently. She believed in herself. She was not invisible anymore. She had found her voice, and she would use it to help others find theirs. The fight for justice was ongoing. There would be more battles ahead. More challenges. More moments when courage would be required. But Seo-Yun was ready. She walked down the street toward the bus stop, the morning sun warming her face. She thought about the quote Mr. Williams had written in her book, about following in the footsteps of those who fought before her. She was part of a long tradition now. A tradition of people who refused to accept injustice. People who spoke truth to power. People who believed that change was possible and worked to make it real. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Seo-Yun understood now that it does not bend on its own. It bends because people like her push it. She reached the bus stop and stood waiting. She looked around at the diverse city, at the people of different backgrounds going about their lives. Each person had a story. Each person deserved dignity and respect. Each person had the right to be seen and heard. The bus arrived. Seo-Yun got on and found a seat. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. She had been asked to write an article for a national education magazine about her experience. She began to type. "My name is Seo-Yun Park," she wrote. "I am a recent high school graduate and a future college student. But more importantly, I am someone who learned that silence is not safety and that speaking up while terrifying is necessary." She continued writing as the bus moved through the city. She wrote about her experience. She wrote about what she learned. She wrote advice for other students facing discrimination. "Do not let anyone make you feel invisible," she wrote. "Your voice matters. Your experience is valid. And when you speak up, you make it easier for others to speak up too. That is how change happens. That is how we build a better world." She finished the article as the bus approached her stop. She read it over once, made a few edits, and then saved it. She would send it to the magazine editor later. As she got off the bus and walked toward the community center where she would be volunteering, Seo-Yun felt at peace. The past year had been incredibly difficult. She had experienced pain and fear and doubt, but she had also experienced growth and strength and hope. She had learned that she was not powerless. She had learned that her voice could create change. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite fear. Most importantly, she had learned that she was not alone. There were people who would support her, people who would fight beside her, people who believed in justice and were willing to work for it. This knowledge would carry her through college and beyond. It would guide her career. It would shape her life. She would continue fighting for justice in big ways and small ways for the rest of her life. Because once you use your voice and see the power it has, you cannot go back to silence. Once you experience creating change, you cannot go back to accepting injustice. Seo-Yun Park had found her voice, and she would use it to help others find theirs. That was her promise to herself, to her family, to her grandmother, and to all the students who would come after her. The fight continued. But Seo-Yun was ready. She was strong. She was brave. And she was just beginning. 6 months passed. Lincoln High School looked the same from the outside, but inside things were different. The changes were both visible and invisible. Some were big, some were small, but they were real. The most striking change was the new principal. Dr. Lisa Park was a Korean-American educator with a doctorate in educational equity. She had spent 20 years turning around struggling schools and building inclusive communities. When Dr. Park was hired, some people questioned whether her ethnicity was the only reason. But Dr. Park's record spoke for itself. She was brilliant, experienced, and committed to real change. On her first day, Dr. Park did something no previous principal had done. She met individually with every student who had filed complaints about discrimination. She listened to their stories. She apologized on behalf of the school. She promised to do better. When she met with Seo-yoon, Dr. Park did not treat her like a troublemaker or a victim. She treated her like a leader. "Thank you," Dr. Park said simply. "Thank you for having the courage to speak up. This school is better because of what you did. I hope you know that." Seo-yoon felt tears in her eyes. After months of being either celebrated as a hero or criticized as a problem, it was powerful to be simply thanked by someone in authority. "I want to invite you to be part of the solution," Dr. Park continued. "We're forming a student equity team. Students will review policies, give input on training, and help us see problems we might miss. Would you be interested?" Seo-yoon agreed. She joined the equity team along with David, Marcus, Sophia, and several other students. They met once a week with Dr. Park and other administrators. Their voices were actually heard, and their suggestions were actually implemented. The policy changes were being put into practice. Every teacher attended monthly training on implicit bias and culturally responsive teaching. Some teachers engaged genuinely, recognizing their own blind spots. Others went through the motions, resentful of being forced to attend, but the trainings included real accountability. Teachers had to demonstrate what they learned. Their grading patterns were monitored. Students could file complaints more easily through an improved system that required prompt responses. A new equity team was hired. Instead of one overworked diversity officer, the district now had 5 staff members dedicated to equity issues. They had real power to investigate complaints and recommend consequences. The changes were not perfect. Some teachers continued to resist. Some complained about political correctness and reverse discrimination. But the culture was shifting. The school was becoming more aware of issues that had been invisible before. Seo-yoon was now a senior. The difficult year had passed. She had survived. More than survived, she had grown stronger. College acceptance letters started arriving in April. She was admitted to several top universities. Schools that had seemed like impossible dreams were now offering her spots. Many offered significant scholarships. Some specifically mentioned her advocacy work and leadership in their acceptance letters. Seo-yoon chose a university with a strong social justice program. She planned to study education policy and law. She wanted to change systems, not just help individuals. She wanted to prevent other students from experiencing what she had experienced. One day in April, Professor Michael Torres from the university contacted Seo-yoon. He taught a course on educational justice. He had seen the news coverage of her story. "I wonder if you would be willing to speak to my students," Professor Torres said. "They study these issues theoretically, but hearing from someone who lived it would be powerful." Seo-yoon was nervous but agreed. The following week she visited the university. She sat in front of college students and shared her story. She talked about the daily reality of discrimination. She talked about finding courage to speak up. She talked about the importance of allies and advocates. "I was just one student," Seo-yoon said, "but I was not alone. David recorded what happened. Sarah investigated. Grace fought legally. Mrs. Foster spoke up. My parents supported me." Change requires a community, not just one person. During the question and answer period, a student asked the question many people wondered about. Was it worth it? The student asked. All the stress, the attention, the conflict. Do you regret speaking up? Seo-yoon paused and thought carefully. Worth it is not the right question, she said finally. Some things you do not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because staying silent has a cost too. I could not live with staying quiet. What happened to me was happening to others. If I stayed silent, it would keep happening. She looked around the room at the college students. Silence feels safe, but it is not. Silence protects the wrong people and hurts the right people. Speaking up was terrifying, but it was necessary. And yes, I would do it again. The students applauded. After class, several came up to talk to her. They shared their own experiences with discrimination. They thanked her for her courage. They said her story inspired them. Back at Lincoln High School, a new freshman named Jordan Smith entered ninth grade. Jordan was African American and nervous about starting high school. He had heard stories about racism in schools. He was worried. But when Jordan walked through the doors of Lincoln High, he saw something different than what he expected. He saw diversity posters that looked genuine, not just performative. He met Dr. Park, who welcomed him warmly. He heard Mr. Williams teach with passion and fairness. Jordan had heard about Seo Yun's story. Every incoming freshman knew about it. It had become part of the school's history, and that history gave Jordan hope. It showed him that when problems happened, they could be addressed. Student voices mattered. Graduation day arrived. It was a beautiful spring day. The ceremony was held outside on the football field. Students wore blue caps and gowns. Families filled the bleachers, taking photos and waving. Seo Yun sat with her classmates. She had been chosen as valedictorian. Her grades were the highest in her class. She would give the graduation speech. In the audience, Min-ji and Ji-hoon sat with tears already forming in their eyes. They thought about all the sacrifices they had made, the long work hours, the tired bodies, the worries about money. All of it had been for this moment. Next to them sat Grace Kim, who had taken time off work to attend. Sarah Martinez was there too, covering the graduation for the news. Mrs. Foster sat in the teacher section, proud of her student. When it was time for the valedictorian speech, Seo Yun walked to the podium. She looked out at hundreds of faces. She saw her parents. She saw her supporters. She saw fellow students who had shared her journey. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "My grandmother came to America with a dream," Seo Yun said. "She wanted her family to have opportunities she never had. She wanted us to get good educations. She wanted us to have voices." She paused, her voice strong and clear. "This year I used my voice. I spoke up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. I told the truth when it would have been safer to pretend everything was fine. And I learned something important." She looked around at her classmates. "I learned that one voice can start a chorus. When I spoke up, others joined me." David recorded what happened. Marcus shared his story. Sophia spoke her truth. Together we created change. She spoke about resilience and courage. She spoke about the immigrant experience and the responsibility to honor the sacrifices of those who came before. She spoke about justice and the long work of making systems better. "We cannot just accept things the way they are," Seo Yun said. "We must question. We must challenge. We must demand better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone." She acknowledged the teachers who had helped her. She thanked Mr. Williams and Mrs. Foster and Dr. Park. She thanked her parents, her voice breaking with emotion. She thanked her classmates for their support. "As we leave Lincoln High School today, we carry responsibility," Seo Yun said. "Responsibility to speak up when we see injustice. Responsibility to support others who are struggling. Responsibility to make our communities better than we found them." She ended with words from her grandmother that her mother had shared with her. "A single thread is weak," Seo Yun said. "But woven together, threads become unbreakable fabric. We are stronger together. We are powerful together, and together we can create the world we want to see." The audience erupted in applause. Many people stood. Some cried. Seo Yun saw her mother sobbing with pride. She saw her father wiping his eyes. She saw Grace and Sarah cheering loudly. After the ceremony, people crowded around Seo Yun. Teachers hugged her. Classmates took photos with her. Strangers thanked her for what she had done. Mrs. Foster found her in the crowd. "I am so proud of you," she said. "You changed this school. You changed lives. Never forget how powerful your voice is." Mr. Williams gave her a gift. It was a book about civil rights leaders. Inside, he had written a message. To Seo Yun, who followed in the footsteps of those who fought before her. "Your courage matters. Your voice matters. You matter." David Chen and his family took photos with the Parks. The two families had become close over the past months. David's father, Tom, had given the Parks legal advice throughout the ordeal. The families planned to stay in touch. "We did something important," David said to Seo Yun as they stood in their graduation gowns. "We made a difference." The school district moved quickly. They had no choice. The media attention was intense. The legal threats were serious. They needed to show they were taking action. Dr. Patricia Thornton arrived at Lincoln High School 1 week after the broadcast. She was a respected investigator who had worked on discrimination cases at schools across the state. She was known for being thorough and fair. Dr. Thornton set up an office in an empty classroom. She put a sign on the door that said, "Confidential Interviews." She invited students to talk to her privately. She promised their identities would be protected. Over 2 weeks, Dr. Thornton interviewed more than 50 students. Some were current students in Mrs. Coldwell's classes. Others were former students who had graduated. All of them had stories to tell. The stories were remarkably similar. Mrs. Coldwell ignored students of color when they raised their hands. She questioned their work more harshly. She graded them more strictly. She made comments about their backgrounds, their names, their families. She made them feel less than. One former student named Jamal described how Mrs. Coldwell always mispronounced his name. "She called me Jamal instead of Jamal," he said. "I corrected her many times. She never got it right. But she said all the white kids' names perfectly, even the difficult ones." Another student named May Lin talked about group projects. "Mrs. Coldwell always put Asian students together," she said. "She would say things like, 'You'll work well together,' with a certain look. Like we were all the same, like we couldn't work with other students." The testimonies painted a clear picture. This was not about one bad day or one misunderstanding. This was a pattern of behavior that had affected dozens of students over many years. Dr. Thornton also reviewed Mrs. Coldwell's grade books from the past 5 years. She entered all the grades into a computer and ran statistical analysis. The results were shocking. Students of color received on average 15% lower grades than white students for similar work. The pattern was consistent across all 5 years. In some cases, students with identical answers on tests received different grades based on their race. Dr. Thornton compared Mrs. Coldwell's grading patterns to other history. Teachers at Lincoln High, the other teachers, showed no such disparities. Their grading was fair and consistent across all racial groups. The numbers did not lie. Mrs. Coldwell had been discriminating against students for years. Dr. Thornton also investigated the administration's response to complaints. She reviewed Principal Morrison's files. She found 7 formal complaints about Mrs. Coldwell over 4 years. Not one had been properly investigated. Morrison had received the complaints, sent a standard response to the parents, and then did nothing. Sometimes he claimed to have spoken with Mrs. Coldwell, but there was no documentation of these conversations. No follow-up. No accountability. Dr. Thornton interviewed Morrison. He was defensive and made excuses. He said Mrs. Coldwell was a veteran teacher who deserved the benefit of the doubt. He said some complaints were from difficult parents who would complain about anything. He said he had to balance student concerns with teacher rights. "Did you ever consider that the pattern of complaints might indicate a real problem?" Dr. Thornton asked. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "In hindsight, perhaps I should have looked more closely," he admitted. But at the time, each individual complaint seemed manageable. "You protected the teacher instead of the students," Dr. Thornton said. It was not a question. Morrison had no good answer. Dr. Thornton also investigated Dr. Helen Reeves and the district's diversity office. She found that Reeves was overwhelmed and undersupported. Reeves handled discrimination complaints for 40 schools with no staff and limited resources. When complaints came in, Reeves would open a file, send a standard letter, and wait for the school to respond. Most schools sent back brief responses saying they had addressed the issue. Reeves had no power to force real investigations. She could only document and hope someone would care. "The system is broken," Reeves told Dr. Thornton. "We pretend to care about diversity, but we don't give it real resources or real power. I'm one person trying to fix problems that require an entire team." While Dr. Thornton investigated, Mrs. Coldwell met with her union representative, Rachel Goldstein. Rachel was an experienced lawyer who had defended many teachers. She reviewed all the evidence Dr. Thornton had collected. "This is bad," Rachel told Mrs. Coldwell bluntly. They sat in Rachel's office downtown. "The video evidence alone is damaging, but combined with the grading patterns and the testimony from so many students, this case is very difficult to defend." "But I didn't mean anything by those comments," Mrs. Coldwell protested. "I was just trying to push students to do their best work." "That may be true," Rachel said, "but intention doesn't matter much in discrimination cases. What matters is impact, and the impact on these students was clearly harmful. Rachel explained the legal situation. If the case went to a hearing, Mrs. Coldwell would likely lose. The school district could terminate her employment. She could lose her teaching license. The case could drag on for months and cost her thousands in legal fees. "What are my options?" Mrs. Coldwell asked. Her voice was small. For the first time, she seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation. "Negotiate a resignation," Rachel said. "Resign before they fire you. In exchange, the district might agree not to pursue license revocation. You would lose your job but keep your dignity and your license even if you can't use it." Mrs. Coldwell sat in silence. Her teaching career was over. 20 years at Lincoln High School were ending not with retirement parties and appreciation, but with shame and accusations. Part of her still wanted to fight. Part of her still believed she had done nothing wrong, but another part of her, a small, quiet part, wondered if maybe the students were right. Maybe she had treated them unfairly. Maybe her biases had hurt people. "I'll resign," she said finally. Rachel negotiated with the district. Mrs. Coldwell would resign effective immediately. She would issue an apology statement. In exchange, the district would not pursue formal termination hearings or license revocation. Both sides wanted to avoid a long public battle. Mrs. Coldwell wrote her resignation letter. She also wrote an apology statement. The statement was brief and carefully worded. It admitted to insufficient cultural sensitivity, but stopped short of admitting intentional discrimination. "I recognize that my actions, regardless of intent, caused harm to students," the statement read. "I apologize for any pain I caused. I am stepping away from teaching to reflect on how I can do better." To many people, the apology felt insufficient. It felt like someone saying sorry only because they got caught. But it was all Mrs. Coldwell could bring herself to say. Principal Morrison faced consequences too. The school board met in emergency session after Dr. Thornton's report came out. Jennifer White led the charge demanding his resignation. Principal Morrison received 7 complaints and did nothing, Jennifer said at the public board meeting. He failed in his fundamental duty to protect students. He prioritized protecting a teacher over protecting the children in his care. That is unacceptable. Other board members agreed. Under pressure, Morrison announced his resignation. Like Mrs. Coldwell, he issued a statement. His was even less sincere. "I have served Lincoln High School with dedication for 15 years, his statement said. "While I believe I acted in good faith, I recognize that the current situation requires fresh leadership. I am stepping down to allow the school to move forward." He took no real responsibility. He admitted no real fault. He simply left. Superintendent Walsh tried to protect his own position by throwing Morrison under the bus. He issued a statement saying Morrison had acted independently and had not followed district protocols for handling complaints. This was a failure of implementation, not policy, Walsh claimed. "We have strong policies against discrimination. Principal Morrison failed to follow them." Jennifer White was not satisfied with this explanation. At the next school board meeting, she demanded broader reforms. "We cannot blame everything on one principal," she said. "The system allowed this to happen. We need mandatory implicit bias training for all staff. We need to revise our complaint procedures so they have teeth. We need more diversity officers with real power and resources. We need regular equity audits of grading and discipline data." The school board debated these proposals. Some members resisted, saying they were too expensive or too extreme. Others supported them strongly. The community watched closely, making their opinions known at public meetings. After weeks of debate, the school board passed a comprehensive reform package. It included everything Jennifer had demanded. The changes would cost money and require effort, but the alternative was more lawsuits and more bad publicity. Grace Kim negotiated a settlement with the school district on behalf of the Park family. The settlement included financial compensation for Seo Yun's emotional distress, but more importantly, it included legally binding commitments to reform. The district agreed to establish a scholarship fund for students who had experienced discrimination. They agreed to hire additional diversity staff. They agreed to regular third-party audits of equity issues. All of this was written into a legal agreement that Grace would monitor. Wednesday evening arrived. The news story would air at 6 o'clock. The Park family gathered in their small living room. They sat on the couch together holding hands. All of them were nervous, as Seo Yun had not told anyone at school about the interview. She did not want to deal with questions or drama before the story aired. She had gone to classes as normal. She had stayed quiet. She waited. At exactly 6 o'clock, the Channel 7 news broadcast began. The Parks watched the screen with held breath. The news anchor appeared. She was a professional woman with a serious expression. "Tonight we bring you an investigation by our reporter Sarah Martinez," she said. "It's a story about one student's experience with discrimination at a local high school. But as Sarah discovered, it reveals a much larger problem in our education system." The screen changed. Sarah Martinez appeared. She stood in front of Lincoln High School. Behind her, students walked in and out of the building. "This is Lincoln High School," Sarah said. "It has a reputation as a diverse, inclusive school. But for some students, the reality is very different. Tonight, we're going to tell you about Seo Yun Park, a 16-year-old honor student who faced constant discrimination from her teacher. This is her story." The screen showed Seo Yun sitting in the interview chair. She looked young but brave. The image showed her speaking, but first Sarah provided background information. Sarah explained who Seo Yun was: a straight-A student, a scholarship recipient, a daughter of immigrant parents who worked hard to provide for their family, a girl who loved learning and wanted to go to college. Then Sarah introduced Mrs. Coldwell, a 20-year veteran teacher, someone parents often requested for their children, someone the school administration trusted and protected. But Mrs. Coldwell had a pattern, Sarah said, a pattern of treating students differently based on their race. And Seo Yun Park experienced this discrimination firsthand. The broadcast showed Seo Yun's interview. She described the daily humiliations, the being ignored in class, the being questioned about her work, the being accused of cheating. Her voice was steady, but viewers could see the pain in her eyes. Then came the video evidence, the classroom footage that David Chen had recorded. Viewers could see Mrs. Coldwell holding up Seo Yun's essay. They could hear her questioning whether Seo Yun wrote it herself. They could hear the words, "too sophisticated for someone from your background." The video that Sarah filmed showed even more. It showed Mrs. Coldwell accusing Seo Yun of cheating on the quiz. It showed the teacher giving Seo Yun a 0, despite having no proof. It showed how Mrs. Coldwell spoke to Seo Yun with suspicion and disrespect. The footage was damning. There was no way to deny what people were seeing and hearing. But Sarah did not stop there. She showed data. Graphics appeared on the screen showing grade distributions in Mrs. Coldwell's classes versus other history teachers. The difference was clear and significant. Students of color received much lower grades on average. "These numbers tell a story," Sarah said. "A story of bias and discrimination that affected many students over many years." The broadcast included interviews with Marcus Johnson and Sophia Ramirez. Their faces were blurred and their voices were disguised to protect them. But their stories were powerful. They described similar experiences with Mrs. Coldwell. Mrs. Foster appeared next. She looked professional but troubled. She explained how she had reported Mrs. Coldwell's behavior multiple times. She showed the emails she sent to Principal Morrison. She explained how nothing was ever done. "The system protected the teacher," Mrs. Foster said on camera, "not the students. That's what hurts the most. We knew this was happening and we did nothing." Sarah interviewed Dr. Helen Reeves, the district diversity officer. Dr. Reeves admitted that complaints had been filed but not properly investigated. She explained the lack of resources and support for addressing discrimination complaints. Grace Kim appeared briefly to explain the legal issues. She talked about students' rights to equal treatment. She explained how patterns of grading disparities can prove discrimination. The broadcast ended with Seo Yun speaking directly to the camera. Her final words were powerful. "I am not less than because of where my family comes from," she said. "No student should be made to feel invisible in a place meant to help them learn. I am speaking up not just for me, but for every student who has been silenced by teachers who are supposed to help them grow." The news segment lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, the park sat in silence for a moment. Then Minji began to cry. Ji-hoon put his arm around his wife. Seo Yun felt both relieved and scared. It was done. Her story was now public. Within an hour, the segment began going viral. Seo Yun's cousin, Kevin Park, had a large social media following. He had over 500,000 followers across different platforms. Kevin shared the news clip with a message. "This is my cousin," Kevin wrote. She's one of the bravest people I know. What happened to her happens to too many Asian American students. We're taught to stay quiet and work hard. But sometimes we need to speak up. Share this. Let people know this is not acceptable. The video spread quickly. People shared it. They commented on it. They expressed outrage and support. By 9 o'clock, the clip had been viewed over 2 million times. By midnight, it was trending nationally. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people called the news station. Other students and families shared similar stories, not just from Lincoln High, but from schools across the district and the state. The floodgates had opened. Social media exploded with reactions. The hashtag #StandWithSeoWoon and Justice at Lincoln began trending. Korean American organizations issued statements supporting Seo-yoon and calling for accountability. Education advocacy groups demanded investigation and reform. Asian American students from across the country shared the video. Many wrote about their own experiences with teachers who questioned their abilities or assumed they cheated. Seo-yoon's story resonated with thousands of people who had felt invisible too. But there was also backlash. Anonymous accounts attacked Seo-yoon. Some called her a liar seeking attention. Others said she was too sensitive and that Mrs. Coldwell was just being a strict teacher. Some accused her of playing the race card and trying to ruin a good teacher's. Career conservative groups online began defending Mrs. Coldwell. They framed the controversy as cancel culture and an attack on traditional education. They said students today were too fragile and could not handle criticism. The Park family's phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted interviews. Supporters sent messages. The attention was overwhelming and frightening. They had expected some reaction, but not this much. Ji-hoon and Minji worried about their daughter. Was this too much for her? Had they made the right decision? But when they looked at Seo-yoon, they saw something different. Yes, she was scared, but she also stood taller. She seemed stronger, not weaker. At Lincoln High School, Thursday morning was chaos. News vans were parked outside the school gates. Reporters tried to interview students as they arrived. Some students talked to reporters. Others rushed past them into the building. Inside the school, everyone was talking about the news story. Teachers gathered in small groups, whispering. Some were shocked. Others were defensive. The faculty was divided. Students had strong opinions, too. Many supported Seo-yoon. They wore homemade buttons that said, "We believe Seo-yoon and end racism at Lincoln." Others thought this was all blown out of proportion. They said Seo-yoon was just a troublemaker. David Chen walked through the hallways and felt people staring at him. Everyone knew he had recorded the video that started everything. Some students thanked him. Others glared at him. One boy shoved him in the hallway and called him a snitch. Mrs. Coldwell did not come to school. Her lawyer had advised her to stay home. The teachers' union had issued a statement saying Mrs. Coldwell denied all accusations and that she treated all students equally. The statement was carefully worded but felt hollow to those who had seen the video. A substitute teacher took over Mrs. Coldwell's classes. The substitute was a young man who looked uncomfortable. He knew everyone was talking about what happened. He tried to teach normally, but it was difficult. Seo-yoon came to school that morning. She felt every eye on her. Some students approached her in the hallway and hugged her. They told her she was brave. They shared their own stories of being treated unfairly. Others avoided her, not wanting to be associated with the controversy. At lunchtime, Marcus Johnson found Seo-yoon in the cafeteria. He sat down next to her. "Thank you," he said simply, "for speaking up." For all of us, Sophia Ramirez joined them. "I've been getting messages from other students," she said. "So many people have stories about teachers like Mrs. Coldwell. You opened the door for them to speak too." Principal Morrison held an emergency assembly during third period. All students gathered in the auditorium. Morrison stood on the stage looking tired and stressed. "I want to address the news story that aired last night," he began. His voice echoed through the large room. "Lincoln High School takes all allegations of discrimination seriously. We are committed to providing a safe and inclusive environment for all students." Some students rolled their eyes. These were the same words administrators always used. They sounded empty. The next day, Seo-yoon and her parents met Grace Kim at her office. The office was in a small building downtown. It was not fancy, but it was clean and professional. Grace met them at the door with a warm smile. "Please come in," Grace said. She spoke some Korean to Ji-hoon, which made him relax a little. He always felt nervous when he had to speak only English. They sat in Grace's office. She offered them tea. She wanted them to feel comfortable. She knew this was difficult for them. "I want you to understand what we're dealing with," Grace began. She spoke clearly and slowly so everyone could understand. "What happened to Seo-yoon is called discrimination. It's against the law. Schools are not allowed to treat students differently because of their race or where their family comes from." "But how do we prove it?" Minji asked. "The principal said it was Seo-yoon's word against the teacher's word." "That was before we had evidence," Grace said. She smiled. "Now we have video. We have recordings of what Mrs. Coldwell said. We have data showing her grading patterns. We have other students willing to testify. This is not just about one person's word anymore." She pulled out some papers and showed them to the Parks. The papers showed grade distributions in Mrs. Coldwell's classes compared to other teachers. The difference was clear. Students with Asian and Latino names received much lower grades on average. "This is proof," Grace said. "This shows a pattern. One incident might be explained away, but a pattern over years? That's discrimination." Ji-hoon looked at the papers. Even though his English was limited, he could understand numbers. The numbers told a clear story. "What can we do?" he asked in Korean. Grace translated for Seo-yoon and Minji. "We have several options," Grace explained. "We can file a formal complaint with the school district. We can file a complaint with the state education department. We can also consider a lawsuit. But lawsuits take a long time and can be very stressful." "What do you think we should do?" Minji asked. Grace thought for a moment. "I think we should use the media investigation first," she said. "Sarah Martinez is building a strong story. When that airs on television, it will put pressure on the school to act. Then we follow up with formal legal complaints. The combination of public attention and legal action is very powerful." "Will Seo-yoon be safe?" Minji asked. This was her biggest worry. Will the school punish her? "Legally, they cannot retaliate against her for speaking up," Grace said. "If they try to punish her, that's another violation. We'll be watching very closely." Grace turned to Seo-yoon. "This is going to be hard," she said honestly. "When you speak up, some people will support you, but others will attack you. They will say you're lying or exaggerating. They will try to make you look bad. You need to be ready for that." Seo-yoon nodded. She had been thinking about this. She knew it would not be easy, but she also knew she could not stay quiet anymore. "I'm ready," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Good," Grace said. "Then let's begin." Grace explained their legal rights. She explained what evidence they needed to gather. She told them to save all emails and graded papers. She told them to write down everything that happened with dates and times. "Documentation is very important," Grace said. "Write down every interaction with Mrs. Coldwell. Write down what she says and who else was there. This creates a record." Seo-yoon already had a journal where she wrote about school. She had been writing in it for months. She had not known it would become evidence, but now it would help her case. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it ended, the Parks felt different. They felt less powerless. For the first time, they had someone on their side who understood the system and could fight for them. As they were leaving, Grace said something that stayed with Seo-yoon. "You showing courage now will help other students in the future. Maybe they won't have to go through what you went through. That's worth something." Meanwhile, Sarah Martinez was continuing her investigation. She had interviewed several former students of Mrs. Coldwell. All of them told similar stories. The pattern was undeniable. She also interviewed Mrs. Foster, an English teacher at Lincoln High. Mrs. Foster had been teaching there for 10 years. She was a kind woman who truly cared about students. "I've seen Mrs. Coldwell's behavior for years," Mrs. Foster told Sarah. They were talking in Mrs. Foster's classroom after school. "I reported it to administration multiple times. Nothing happened." "Why do you think nothing was done?" Sarah asked. Mrs. Foster sighed. "Mrs. Coldwell has been here a long time. She has friends in the district office, and honestly, I think people didn't want to deal with it. It's easier to ignore complaints than to confront a teacher about racism." "Did you keep records of your complaints?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Mrs. Foster said. She pulled out a folder. "I document everything. I learned a long time ago that you need proof." She showed Sarah emails she had sent to Principal Morrison. In the email, she described incidents where Mrs. Coldwell made inappropriate comments about students. She described the grading disparities she noticed. She described how students of color felt uncomfortable in Mrs. Coldwell's class. Morrison's responses were always the same. He thanked her for her concern. He said he would look into it, but nothing ever changed. He protected her, Mrs. Foster said. He protected the teacher instead of the students. That's what this school does. Sarah asked if Mrs. Foster would be willing to appear on camera. Mrs. Foster hesitated. She was afraid of losing her job, but she also felt guilty for staying silent so long. "I'll do it," she finally said. "These students deserve someone to stand up for them." Sarah's investigation also uncovered information about Dr. Helen Reeves, the district's diversity officer. Dr. Reeves was supposed to handle complaints about discrimination, but she was one person trying to cover an entire district. She was overworked and undersupported. Sarah found files showing that Dr. Reeves had received at least 8 complaints about Mrs. Coldwell over 5 years. Each time, Dr. Reeves opened a file and sent a standard letter to the school. But there was never any real investigation. The complaints just sat in a filing cabinet. Sarah called Dr. Reeves for an interview. Dr. Reeves was defensive at first, but when Sarah explained what she had found, Dr. Reeves became more honest. "I'm one person," Dr. Reeves said. Her voice was tired. "I handle discrimination complaints for 40 schools. I don't have a staff. I don't have resources. I get hundreds of complaints every year. I do what I can, but it's not enough." "So complaints just get filed away?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes," Dr. Reeves admitted. "Unless there's a legal threat or media attention, schools don't prioritize these issues. They say they care about diversity, but when it comes to actually holding teachers accountable, they back down." This conversation showed Sarah that the problem was bigger than one teacher. The whole system was failing students. Back at Lincoln High, the atmosphere was changing. Students were talking more openly about Mrs. Coldwell. Some shared their own experiences. Others defended her, saying she was just strict and people were too sensitive. The school was dividing into camps. Some students wore buttons that said "Believe Students." Others rolled their eyes and said this was all blown out of proportion. David Chen found himself in the middle of this division. Some students thanked him for speaking up. Others called him a troublemaker. One day someone wrote "snitch" on his locker. David's father, Tom Chen, noticed his son was stressed. Tom was a civil rights lawyer. He had experience with these situations. "Standing up for what's right is never easy," Tom told his son one evening. They were sitting in their living room. "People will try to make you doubt yourself. They'll say you're causing trouble, but you did the right thing." "Some kids won't talk to me anymore," David said. "They think I'm going to record them or report them." "Those aren't your real friends then," Tom said. "Real friends support you when you do the right thing." Tom also taught David about the history of civil rights. He explained how change always faces resistance. He explained how people who speak up are often attacked at first, but history remembers them as heroes. This gave David strength. He decided to write an article for the school newspaper. The article was about courage and speaking truth to power. The newspaper advisor agreed to publish it. Meanwhile, Mrs. Coldwell was feeling pressure. She heard the whispers. She saw students looking at her. She knew something was happening, but no one told her exactly what. She became more careful in class. She smiled more. She tried to be friendlier to students of color. But it felt fake. Students could tell she was only being nice because she was afraid. One afternoon, Mrs. Coldwell called her union representative. The teachers' union protected teachers when they faced complaints. The representative's name was Rachel Goldstein. "I think some students are trying to cause trouble for me," Mrs. Coldwell told Rachel. "There's a reporter at the school. Students are making accusations." "What kind of accusations?" Rachel asked. "They're saying I treat students unfairly," Mrs. Coldwell said. "That I'm racist. It's ridiculous. I treat all my students the same. I have grade books," Mrs. Coldwell said. "I have lesson plans." "That's good," Rachel said. "If anyone makes formal complaints, we'll fight them. But in the meantime, be very careful. Document everything. Don't say anything that could be misinterpreted." Sarah Martinez stood at the back of Mrs. Coldwell's classroom. Her cameraman, Jake, stood beside her. They watched everything carefully. The camera was recording, but Mrs. Coldwell did not know she was the one being investigated. The morning classes went by. Sarah watched Mrs. Coldwell teach 3 different periods. The teacher smiled for the camera. She seemed friendly and professional. But Sarah noticed small things. She saw how Mrs. Coldwell called on certain students more than others. She saw the way the teacher looked at students with darker skin or different last names. During lunch period, Sarah left the classroom. She had arranged to meet with David Chen. They met in an empty classroom away from other students. David brought 3 other students with him. He had told them about Sarah and her investigation. They wanted to help. They wanted their stories to be heard. "Thank you for meeting with me," Sarah said. She sat on the edge of a desk. She wanted the students to feel comfortable. "I want to hear about your experiences with Mrs. Coldwell. But first, I want you to know that I will protect your identities if you want. You don't have to show your faces on camera if you don't want to." The first student to speak was Marcus Johnson. He was a senior, 18 years old. He was African American and had been in Mrs. Coldwell's class the year before. "Mrs. Coldwell always graded my work harder than white students," Marcus said. "I would write an essay and get a B-. My friend Jake, who was white, would write something similar and get an A. When I asked her about it, she said my work lacked depth or was too casual, but Jake's work was the same." Marcus pulled out his old graded papers. He had kept them. He showed Sarah several essays with harsh grades and few comments. Next to them, he had similar essays from Jake with much better grades. Sarah looked at the papers carefully. The difference was clear. Both students wrote at similar levels. "But the grades were very different. Did you ever complain about this?" Sarah asked. "I told my parents," Marcus said. "They went to the principal just like Seo-Yun's parents did. Same result. Nothing changed. The principal said Mrs. Coldwell was experienced and knew what she was doing. They didn't care that her grading was unfair." The next student to speak was Sofia Ramirez. She was 16 years old. She was Latina and currently in Mrs. Coldwell's class. "Mrs. Coldwell can't pronounce my name right," Sofia said. "I've told her the correct way many times, but she keeps saying it wrong. She says Sophia instead of Sophia. It's not hard, but she won't try. Some students have names just as hard, but she says theirs correctly. It's only the Latino and Asian names she gets wrong." Sarah wrote notes quickly. This was a pattern. It was not just one student. It was not just Seo-Yun. This teacher treated many students badly based on their race. The third student was Amir Hassan. He was 17 and Muslim. He wore traditional clothes sometimes. When he did, Mrs. Coldwell treated him differently. "When we studied Middle Eastern history, she made comments," Amir said. "She would look at me when she talked about terrorism or violence. She never said my name, but everyone knew she was looking at me. She made me feel like I had to apologize for things I had nothing to do with." "Did other students notice this?" Sarah asked. "Yes," Amir said. "Some of them told me they saw it. But no one knew what to do. Mrs. Coldwell is careful. She doesn't say things directly. She just looks at you a certain way. She makes comments that sound innocent but aren't. It's hard to prove." David spoke next. "I recorded what happened to Seo-Yun," he said. "But I've been watching Mrs. Coldwell for 2 years. I've seen her do this to many students. Students of color always get treated worse. She ignores us in class. She grades us harder. She questions our work. White students don't get treated this way." Sarah listened to all of them. Her heart was heavy with what she heard. But she was also glad they trusted her. She was glad they were willing to speak up. "Here's what I'm going to do," Sarah said. "I'm going to document what happens today. I have permission to film in the school, but I'm also going to investigate the pattern. I'm going to look at grade distributions. I'm going to look at disciplinary records. I'm going to build a complete picture of what's happening here." "Will this actually change anything?" Sophia asked. She sounded doubtful. "Adults always say they'll help, but then nothing happens." Sarah looked at her seriously. "I can't promise everything will change overnight," she said honestly. "But I can promise that your stories will be heard. People will see what's happening. And when people see the truth, it's harder for schools to ignore it." The students nodded. They had a small bit of hope. It was more than they had yesterday. The lunch period ended. Sarah returned to observing classes. She went back to Mrs. Coldwell's classroom for the afternoon period. This was Seo-Yun's class. Seo-Yun entered the room. She looked tired. She had not slept well. She was worried about school and her parents and everything. She sat down quietly and took out her notebook. The class began. Mrs. Coldwell was teaching about the civil rights movement. She talked about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. She talked about equality and justice. The words sounded good, but to students who knew the truth, the words felt empty. How could Mrs. Coldwell teach about equality when she treated students so unfairly? How could she talk about Martin Luther King's dream when she judged students by the color of their skin. Seo-Yun stared at her desk. The irony was too painful. Then Mrs. Coldwell announced a surprise quiz. The students groaned. They had to answer questions about the reading from the night before. Seo-Yun had studied. Despite everything, she always studied. She had read the chapter 3 times. She had taken notes. She answered every question on the quiz carefully. When the quiz time was over, Mrs. Coldwell collected the papers. She told the students to read silently from their textbooks while she graded. Sarah watched from the back of the room. Her camera was positioned to film the teacher's desk. She had permission to film classroom activities. Everything was legal. Mrs. Coldwell graded the quizzes quickly. She made check marks and wrote scores at the top of each paper. When she got to Seo-Yun's quiz, she stopped. She looked at it for a long time. Her face became hard. "Seo-Yun," Mrs. Coldwell called. Her voice was cold. Seo-Yun looked up. Her stomach dropped. She knew that tone. It meant trouble. "Come here, please," Mrs. Coldwell said. Seo-Yun stood up slowly. She walked to the teacher's desk. Every student in the class watched. The room was very quiet. "This quiz," Mrs. Coldwell said, holding up Seo-Yun's paper. "You got every answer correct." "Yes, ma'am," Seo-Yun said quietly. "I studied the chapter." "Every single answer is perfect," Mrs. Coldwell said. Her voice was suspicious. "That's very unusual." "I read the chapter 3 times," Seo-Yun said. "I wanted to make sure I understood it." Mrs. Coldwell looked at her closely. "There is no way you could have known some of these answers without help," she said. "These questions were about details. Small facts. How did you remember all of them?" Seo-Yun felt her face getting hot. "I took notes while I read," she said. "I wrote down important details." "I think you had help," Mrs. Coldwell said flatly. "Did someone give you the answers? Did you look at someone else's paper?" The accusation hung in the air. Other students gasped. Cheating was a serious charge. "No," Seo-Yun said. Her voice shook. "I would never cheat. I did the work myself." "This score is suspicious," Mrs. Coldwell said. "Given your background, I find it hard to believe you understood all of this material so perfectly." There it was again. Your background. What did that mean? That she was Korean? That her parents were immigrants? That they didn't have much money? "I studied hard," Seo-Yun said. Tears were forming in her eyes. "I always study hard." "I'm giving you a 0 on this quiz," Mrs. Coldwell said. "And I'm writing a disciplinary referral for academic dishonesty." "But I didn't cheat," Seo-Yun said. Her voice was louder now. She was desperate. "You can ask me any question from the chapter. I'll answer it. I know the material." "The decision is made," Mrs. Coldwell said. She wrote a 0 at the top of the paper and handed it to Seo-Yun. David Chen stood up from his desk. "This isn't fair," he said loudly. "I studied with Seo-Yun yesterday in the library. I saw her reading and taking notes. She knows this material." Mrs. Coldwell turned to face David. Her eyes were hard. "Mr. Chen, sit down," she said. "Unless you want to join Seo-Yun in receiving a referral." David stood there for a moment longer. He looked at Seo-Yun. He looked at the teacher. He wanted to say more. He wanted to defend his classmate. But he was afraid too. Finally, he sat down. His hands were shaking with anger. Seo-Yun walked back to her desk. She felt like everyone was staring at her. She felt ashamed even though she had done nothing wrong. She looked down at the 0 on her paper. This 0 could hurt her grade. It could hurt her grade point average. It could affect her college applications. All because she studied too well. All because she was too good. Sarah Martinez had filmed everything. Her camera had captured the entire exchange. She had the audio of Mrs. Coldwell questioning Seo-Yun. She had the accusation of cheating. She had the mention of your background. This was exactly what she needed. This was proof that could not be denied. After class ended, Sarah waited in the hallway. She saw Seo-Yun leave the classroom. The girl's face was full of pain. Sarah approached her gently. "Excuse me," Sarah said. "Are you Seo-Yun Park?" That evening, Seo-Yun sat at the small kitchen table in her family's apartment. The apartment was not big, but it was clean and warm. Her mother had made it feel like home with small plants on the windowsill and family photos on the walls. Dinner was ready. Her mother, Minji, had made rice and soup after coming home from her first job. Soon she would leave for her second job at the convenience store. She worked from 6 in the evening until midnight most nights. "Eat, Seo-Yun," Minji said, putting food in front of her daughter. You need to eat, but Seo-yoon could not eat. Her stomach felt tight. Every time she thought about what happened in class, she felt sick. She pushed the rice around on her plate with her spoon. Minji noticed immediately. Mothers always know when something is wrong. She sat down across from Seo-yoon and looked at her daughter's face. Seo-yoon's eyes were still red from crying. What happened? Minji asked in Korean. They spoke Korean at home. Tell me. Nothing, Mom, Seo-yoon said. I'm just tired. Don't lie to me, Minji said gently. I can see you have been crying. What happened at school? The door opened. Seo-yoon's father, Ji-hoon, came in from work. He looked tired. His clothes were dirty from the factory. He worked with machines and boxes all day. His back hurt most nights, but he never complained. I'm home, Ji-hoon said in Korean. He saw his wife and daughter at the table. He saw the look on his daughter's face. What's wrong? Minji looked at Seo-yoon. Something happened at school, she said to her husband. Seo-yoon felt the tears coming again. She had tried to be strong all day, but now seeing her parents, she could not hold it in anymore. Everything came out. She told them about Mrs. Coldwell. She told them how the teacher ignored her when she raised her hand. She told them about being made to work alone. She told them how the teacher questioned her essay in front of everyone. She told them about the comments about scholarships and certain students. As she talked, tears ran down her face. Her voice broke. Her hands shook. All the hurt and embarrassment came out in a flood of words. Minji's face became very serious. Ji-hoon's face grew dark with anger. He clenched his fists on the table. This is not right, Ji-hoon said. His voice was low but full of emotion. This teacher has no right to treat you this way. Has this happened before? Minji asked. Or just today? Seo-yoon looked down at her plate. It happens a lot, she said quietly. Mrs. Coldwell is always like this with me. She grades my work harder than others. She makes comments about how I speak or dress. She treats me like I don't belong there. Why didn't you tell us? Minji asked. Her eyes were full of tears now, too. I didn't want to worry you, Seo-yoon said. You both work so hard. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just studied harder and was more perfect, she would treat me better. But it doesn't matter what I do. She will always see me as less. Ji-hoon stood up. He was so angry he could not sit still. Tomorrow we go to the school, he said. We talked to the principal. This stops now, Minji nodded. Yes, she said. We must do something. That night Seo-yoon went to bed early, but she could not sleep. She heard her parents talking in the kitchen. They were making plans. Her father would take time off from work. They would go to the school together. Seo-yoon felt guilty. Her father would lose wages if he took time off. They needed every dollar. Money was always tight, but her parents said this was more important. The next morning came quickly. Seo-yoon got ready for school. Her parents got ready too. Minji had called the school office and made an appointment with Principal Morrison. The meeting was at 9 in the morning. They walked into Lincoln High School together. Ji-hoon wore his best clothes, but they were old and worn. Minji wore a simple dress. They both looked nervous. They were not comfortable in official buildings. Their English was not perfect. They worried people would not take them seriously. The school office was busy. Students came and went with late passes. Teachers picked up papers from their mailboxes. The secretary at the front desk looked at the parks and asked them to wait. They sat in plastic chairs in the hallway outside the principal's office. Other people walked by and looked at them. Some looked curious. Others barely noticed them. Seo-yoon felt small and uncomfortable. Finally, the door opened. Principal James Morrison stood in the doorway. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and an expensive suit. He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Park, he said. Please come in. They entered his office. The office was large and impressive. There were awards on the walls. Diplomas from universities hung in frames. Photos showed the principal shaking hands with important people. Everything in the room said, I am important. The Park sat in the chairs across from his big desk. Morrison sat behind the desk. The setup made them feel like children called to see the principal for being bad. Now what can I do for you? Morrison asked. He folded his hands on his desk and looked at them. Minji looked at Ji-hoon. Her husband's English was not as good as hers. She would have to do most of the talking. We are here about our daughter's teacher, Minji began. Her English was careful and slow. Mrs. Coldwell, she treats Seo-Yoon badly. I see, Morrison said. He did not look surprised or concerned. He looked like he had heard this before. Can you give me specific examples? Minji tried to explain. She told him about yesterday's class. She told him how the teacher questioned Seo-Yoon's work. She told him about the comments about scholarships. She told him this had been happening for a long time. Morrison listened, but his face showed he was not really hearing them. He was waiting for them to finish so he could respond. When Minji stopped talking, Morrison leaned back in his chair. I understand you're concerned, he said. His voice was calm but not kind. But I think there may be some misunderstanding here. Misunderstanding? Ji-hoon said. His English was broken, but his meaning was clear. No misunderstanding. Teacher is wrong. Morrison looked uncomfortable. He did not like when people disagreed with him. Mrs. Coldwell is a veteran educator, he said. She has been teaching here for 20 years. She has an excellent record. I'm sure she did not mean any harm. But she did harm, Minji said. Her voice was stronger now. She hurt my daughter. She made her feel ashamed in front of other students. Morrison sighed. Sometimes students can be oversensitive, he said. Teenagers take things personally. What might seem like criticism to Seo-Yoon could just be Mrs. Coldwell's teaching style. This is not about style, Minji said. This is about respect. She does not respect my daughter. Morrison's face became less friendly. I hear what you're saying, he said. But without clear evidence, I cannot take action against a teacher. It's your daughter's word against Mrs. Coldwell's word, and Mrs. Coldwell has been here a long time. The message was clear. He believed the teacher, not the student. He believed the American teacher who had been there for 20 years, not the Korean family who were complaining. Can you at least talk to her? Minji asked. Ask her to be more fair? Morrison nodded slowly. I can have a conversation with her, he said. But I want to be clear that making formal accusations could be complicated. The teachers' union is very strong. If we pursue this formally, it could take a long time. It could involve lawyers. It could become very difficult. He paused and looked at them. Sometimes it's better to let things settle down naturally. These situations often resolve themselves. Seo-Yoon will move to a different class next year. Maybe it's better to just wait it out. Minji felt her hope dying. Ji-hoon looked angry and frustrated. They had come here hoping for help. Instead, they were being told to stay quiet and wait. What if it gets worse? Minji asked. What if this teacher hurts my daughter's grades? Seo-Yoon needs good grades for college. Morrison spread his hands. I'm sure it won't come to that, he said. Just encourage Seo-Yoon to do her best and not worry so much about what the teacher thinks. Focus on the work. He stood up. The meeting was over. He had given them 15 minutes of his time and told them nothing would change. The Parks left the office feeling defeated. They walked down the hallway in silence. Outside the school, Minji began to cry. Ji-hoon put his arm around his wife. I'm sorry, Ji-hoon said. My English is not good enough. I could not help. It's not your fault, Minji said. They would not listen anyway. They don't care about us. They felt powerless. They were immigrants in a system they did not fully understand. They had limited English. They had no lawyers or connections. They had no power against teachers and principals in schools. The system was designed to protect itself, not to protect families like theirs. When Seo-Yoon came home from school that day, she saw her mother's face. She knew the meeting had not gone well. What did the principal say? She asked. Minji did not want to tell her daughter the truth. She did not want Seo-Yoon to feel hopeless, but she also could not lie. He said he will talk to the teacher, Minji said, but I don't think anything will change. Seo-Yoon nodded. She had expected this. Deep down, she knew that complaining would not help. The school would protect the teacher. They always did. That night, Seo-Yoon lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She thought about quitting school. She thought about giving up her dreams of college. What was the point of working so hard if people like Mrs. Coldwell would always be there to tear her down?